back from the holiday break with another episodes of Breakdowns and Breakaways. You see what I did? I kind of pulled it in there a little bit. Not really. Planned it exactly land very well. But a lot's happened in the 2 weeks.
I think you might still be a little drunk from Thanksgiving break.
It might be, man. It's going to be a long show. I can't even talk. I've been at this studio since 9 a.m. and we recorded 4, so it's been a long day.
But if you're only listening to this,
you're not going to see the surprise.
Yeah, I brought a surprise today from work. So I've been working at an ice company, which I'm not going to get into the details of how that came about or what all that entails. But the Penguins do occasionally order sculptures from us for like big events or whatever it might be. This sculpture that's sitting right here. So yes, we have a giant frozen Penguins logo sitting in between us. If you're not watching,
the question is, does it melt before we finish this show?
I was told in good circumstances, when it's fresh, it'll last like 8 to 12 hours in like normal room temperature. But this is a year old, and we've already had it sitting out for a little bit. So I would guess we have maybe 2 hours. I'm actually looking at a little sweat coming down it right now. So
all right. So this is going to be the fastest episode in Breakdowns and Breakaways podcast history, which I'm sure a lot of people are happy about.
Anyway, let's talk about this stinky power.
Yeah.
play.
So a lot's happened in 2 weeks, and they're treading water, I think is the best way to put it. But the power play, man, the power play. When you think about who is on the power play, right? Let's name some names here: Erik Karlsson, Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin. Just those three alone, you would hope that a power play with those three guys on it would be top of the league, top maybe 5 teams in the league. They're not that. It's not. It's really bad. So why is the talent not? Why is it not like transitioning over? Like what's the issue here? What do you see as the issue?
I think an easier question to answer would be what's not the issue?
So is it this, like I was listening to, I think it was 32 Thoughts with Elliot Friedman and Jeff Merrick, and I think that they had mentioned that it's just not enough puck to go around to all these scorers. I don't see that as the issue, because Sid's a playmaker, Karlsson's a playmaker, Gino is a scorer, but he's also been a playmaker for his, for I don't see that as the problem. I think it's the opposite. There's nobody willing to pull the trigger all the time.
Yeah, for me, I don't necessarily buy that there's like too many cooks in the kitchen kind of thing. First off, we've seen Crosby, Malkin, Letang do phenomenal things on the power play for large stretches of their careers. So, and the other thing about it is you see a lot of like aging stars kind of buoy their production with power play points. And it's so funny that Malkin and Crosby specifically here over the past year or two have actually been buoying their production with 5-on-5 points.
Yeah.
Regardless of that, I don't see any reason to believe that you can't have all the talent they have on that top unit. For me, it's the fact that it at least seems like they're all trying to appease the players. That they're all trying to appease each other and get each other those puck touches and create those pretty goals. We've talked so much about how this team loves to try and pass the puck into the back of the net. So I think there is an element of that that needs to be discussed and obviously addressed here, but the utter just lack of cohesion, and I'm not even just talking about when they're in the zone, but specifically their breakouts and how they do their quick regroups on changes of possession, or especially like those light dumps that really, when the penalty kill is only making it out to like center red. There was a point in time, and now I legitimately don't even know what they're trying to do on some of these power play breakouts, because they really have not been clean all year. But recently they were trying to emulate what the Sharks were doing last year, which was Carlson would on the breakout. Carlson would lead the puck up ice through the middle with two guys trailing him on both flanks. He would kind of pull up and pose himself as a threat at center red or the offensive blue line, and then he'd drop it off to one of those guys and they'd skate it in themselves, or they'd hit somebody at the boards at the offensive blue line.
Okay.
Now, the Sharks didn't have a lot of talent on that power play. It looked pretty cohesive. Like I went back and watched when the Penguins got Carlson, I went back and watched what they were doing on the power play to see if he might help influence some necessary change. And I was looking at it and I was like, okay, I was a little surprised that Carlson wasn't overly involved. Obviously, he was the guy headmanning and breaking the puck out in these instances. But he wasn't necessarily being relied on to like dangle through all four penalty killers to gain the zone and get shots off. They had guys like Alex Barabanov executing a sound, fundamental scheme or some kind of drawn up play here that is easily executed on a consistent basis. The Penguins, for a stretch of time, were trying to emulate what the Sharks were doing last year, and they couldn't do it. And they could not do it.
Why do you think that is? I mean, like, does the skill not translate? Is it just a different, to me, when I look at a good power play, I think that the execution is vastly more important than the skill because you have that extra guy on the ice. I don't think that you have to be the most skilled team to have a good power play. It helps. I mean, look at Edmonton. Last year for them, that they lived and died by their power play. So it definitely helps, but I don't think it's the most important thing to have skill at every single like super skill at every single position. Right. Is there, I mean, like at what point in time does the coaching staff look at this and shake it up and maybe look at taking one of these guys off of the top power play and putting someone else in?
Well, they did that and it didn't last long.
Well, no, I guess I'm talking about
permanently.
Not permanently. I'm talking about one of the top three and putting them down.
Well, that's what happened. They had Malkin on the second power play. It did not last long at all. Because then you're looking, you got Vinny Hinostroza up on your top power play. Vinny Hinostroza, like there is, I agree with what you said, but on the other hand of that, or on the other side of that, Vinny Hinostroza's skills. Well,
I think there's with this roster, there's such a steep drop off between the top six and the bottom six that that there maybe what I'm suggesting isn't realistically an option because of like you still need skill. I want to make that clear. Like I've been going since 9 a.m. today. My brain's in like 8 different places. I'm not saying you don't need skill on a power play. What I'm saying is that, maybe it's more execution with that skill than it is, having the best of the best of the best.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt, but that still begs the question, why aren't these guys who have all this talent who are still able to execute in almost every other facet of the game, why are they not executing on the power play?
I think it's the best way to put it is we are sitting here and I'm sounding like an idiot trying to figure out what's wrong with this power play. I mean,
everybody's looked like an idiot at one point or another because like
I think that because they shouldn't be this bad. I mean, that's the thing. It's like you're checking under every rock and you're checking every nook and cranny and why is it not producing? And I can't give you a good answer. Like if I try to give you an answer, I'm just going to keep looking more and more like an idiot. That's where I'm at with it.
Well, here's the other aspect of this. Earlier in the season, and obviously the power play hasn't been clicking at all year in terms of actually putting the puck in the back of the net. But through the first 6-7 games of the season, the power play was actually like I would see so many comments about, the power play is just they're not willing to shoot. They're not shooting enough. 6 or 7 games in, the Penguins were leading the NHL while on the power play in shots, like on a permanent basis. They're leading in shots, shot attempts, and expected goals. And expected goals were by a wide margin. And now, granted, weird things happen. You'll see that in small samples. But you extend that window another 3-4 games. You go over to hockeyviz.com where you see all those little heat maps of whether it's offensive, defensive zone or whatever. I'm sure everybody's familiar. Yeah. I don't know why I'm over explaining that. Anyway, You go there and you look, and it's literally a sea of, oh my God, they're shooting at a high frequency from all of the dangerous areas all the time. The goals have got to be coming. And then I'm like, the goals have got to be coming. The goals have got to be coming.
But they never do.
They never do. But now they're not getting those shots, and they're not even creating those chances. So at one point it was like, yeah, stick with the process. Maybe it'll come, even though there were some aspects of the process that were still a little sketchy, at least visually.
Yeah.
But now visually and statistically, it's just awful.
Is it coaching?
I do remember when I was still on the beat, the Penguins had just played a game out in Arizona. It was like the last game of their road trip, like after the Winter Classic, and then they went to Vegas. And they won the game, but the power play didn't have a great game, and it was probably in the midst of one of the power play struggles of last season. And I had asked Sullivan something about the power play, and he basically said, he's like, there's an element here of us not wanting to overcoach these guys or take the sticks out of their hands. I don't know how that has evolved or changed with Karlsson in the mix, or how that's changed with the lack of actually putting the puck in the back of the net. But there is an aspect of, we're not really coaching these guys, at least to some degree.
That is the only thing that I can think of that makes sense. Either there's a disconnect between the coaches, the coaching staff. It's Todd Reardon, right, would be the one responsible for this. For the most part.
I'm sorry, I'm going to cut you off again, just because I see so many people calling for. I also hate how like sports culture is just evolving into, we're going to fire whoever's responsible for whatever's bad about this.
Putting a pin on this, Sunday didn't help that.
No, not at all. Not at all. But with that being said, I'm not saying Todd Reardon is or isn't responsible for, or mainly responsible for what is going on with the power play. I'm just saying,
as a coach, he is the one responsible for the power play.
Well, yes, but what I'm getting at here is that while his name might be on top of that, let's also not ignore the fact that Mike Sullivan's just sitting there and throwing his hands up and saying, I'm not involved in any way, shape, or form with the power play.
My point in bringing that up is not to call out anyone.
Right.
My point is, the only thing that makes sense to me is there's a disconnect between the coaching staff and the players and what is wanted. And if they are, so say what you said about Sullivan last year, say that is actually what's going on, that they're not trying to overcoach. Well, you've got Karlsson that's coming in with his idea, and Crosby and Malkin have their ideas, and Gensel has his idea, and sooner or later there's too much going on, and then that blows the cohesion that you brought up. That goes out the window, blows it up. So I almost wonder if there does need to be an overcoaching with this right now. Like, this is our system. This is what we're going to do. We're going to do X, Y, and Z, and we're going to do it well, and we're going to strip this down and go almost keep it simple, just go, this is how it's going to be until we can, maybe get some tread going, gain some traction, and then we'll see where it goes from there. Because that, to me, is the only thing that I can hang my hat on. It's like, okay, that explains what's wrong. Because with all of the skill and the type of coaches that they have, I don't think that Sullivan or Reardon are bad coaches. I think they're both good NHL coaches. None of this makes sense. Like, the heads together in that room should be able to put an average power play on the ice.
I agree with everything you said. I do not, though, because we genuinely don't know. This
is all speculation. Right. Everything I said is speculation.
So the one thing I do want to say is I just don't want to ignore the possibility that maybe they are being overcoached here, and that's why it looks so dysfunctional.
Okay.
That could be a possibility, but I completely agree with everything you said, and I fall on that side as well.
But that is an option as well, that this could be just overcoaching. Right. I'm not, and again, with the way the NHL culture is, we're never going to find out. They're never going to say, "Oh yeah, this is what was wrong." Whenever it does get working, and I am of the opinion that it will eventually get clicking. I don't think that this is going to be like this for 82 games.
They're going to have to figure the power play out, because it's shaping up like their playoff lives might depend on it.
And so when it does, we're not going to hear somebody say, "Oh, well, this is what was wrong at the beginning of the season." They're just going to, Sullivan's going to give the old stick-to-itiveness, and we just war of attrition. We just had to, keep knocking at the door until it opened. I mean, that's what every NHL team says whenever something finally goes right. They never are open or transparent about it. So all we can do with this is really speculate.
Yeah, and that's one thing just in sports in general. I can understand keeping things behind closed doors, but with how just large of a presence sports have, and specifically teams and athletes have, like how much they impact the individual, right? Like I just feel as if they're, and I'm not saying you need to be giving excruciatingly personal details, but there's so much crap, especially like the Connor Bedard mom, Corey Perry. I'm not even going to get into it, but if you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. That kind of stuff is completely avoidable.
Yeah, and that's a big thing with information in sports, like you said. But going back to their playoff lives, the power play, like you said, is going to play a big part of it. But I do think there are other things with this team right now that are going to play a big factor in their playoff lives as well. What's like to you? What do you see as like the most important thing right now? To me, it's goaltending. But what's your? We can get into that later, maybe. But like, what's yours?
Goaltending is probably we don't have to get into that later, because like goaltending is a massive factor here.
I mean, both of them, either it's shutout or bust right now. Like it seems to be how both of them are playing.
Yeah. So one, I still think we're in the midst of seeing like the wishy-washy Shirey, because like he has been pretty darn bad in some of the games he's played, but he's also leading the NHL in shutouts, and he's been really good lately. And Nedeljkovic, like I remember the episode we did sitting here talking, and I'm like throwing my hands up. I'm like, look, the dude hasn't been good lately, but he had one really good stretch of games during the COVID season. So like if he's able to recapture that level, that's going to be awesome. And short sample here. I think Nedeljkovic has 4 starts so far, maybe 5 up in the NHL. I know he had a rehab stint down in the AHL where he scored a goal, which was pretty cool. Not that matters at all, but anyway.
Goalie goals are always good.
Yeah, goalie goals are awesome. So, but again, this is a really small sample here. So it's encouraging that, and I think I've mentioned this specifically with Shirey as well, it's encouraging that they're showing the ability to do so, as we lost one of our lights.
Yeah, one of the lights died. The other ones might go as well. So
they're showing the ability to do so. I don't know that it's necessarily, okay, this is what they're doing right now. This is their new baseline, what we should expect from them going forward. However, because it's goaltending and sports, you're going to have some up and down nature regardless, but especially at that goaltending position. But it's all about capturing that lightning in a bottle. So they're showing the ability to do it right now over a little bit of an extended period of time. That'll play again when the postseason rolls around. And I think that is what what the Penguins and fans, everybody should be most encouraged about, because if the power play does start to figure it out, all of a sudden you've got a power play that can maybe win you some games. And then all of a sudden you've got not one, but 2 guys in the crease between the pipes that you're not worried about giving up a chance here and there.
And for me, the big thing with the power play and all of this is Sid, at time of recording, still leads the league in 5-on-5 scoring, correct?
I believe so.
Yeah,
yes.
So if he gets going on the power play, you're not only talking about this team figuring out the playoffs, but you're talking about Sid being in the thick of the Hart Trophy conversation at 36 years old.
We'd be talking about his Hart Trophy candidacy right this second if he had 5 more power play points.
Yeah. And that's earlier. You brought this up earlier, not to keep going back to things that you said earlier in this episode, but at that age, normally they front load the power play and back load the 5-on-5. He's doing the opposite. They figure the power play out. There's so many things. I think so many dominoes fall off of that. Another thing that I think has been, at least in my opinion, has been better is the defensive play from some of the guys that we had talked about earlier in the season. Mainly Ryan Graves has been, in my opinion, he's been better. I don't think he's been.
The problem with Graves, I agree. He just has like these moments where it's just like, ugh.
But I think that what we saw in the first maybe 5 to 7 games of him, where we both were kind of, he left a lot, to be desired in his game. I think he's cleaned a lot of that up, and I think he's been a lot more closer to what the team had hoped for. If he can get rid of those moments, which definitely agree with you, he's had, I think that's something that's going to be a big thing for this team as well.
I wouldn't expect those to go away. Like that was part of the problem. That was part of his problem when he was with the Avalanche. That was part of his problem with the Devils. So I don't think that's going anywhere. However, to give him some props, and something that I hadn't really given a whole lot of attention to leading up to the start of the season, was that he's not hampering them at all, at least anywhere near to a degree that Brian Dumoulin would have offensively. Like Graves is, and honestly, that might have been an oversight by a lot of us, just in the public sphere, whether it was analysts or fans or whoever, that part of the intrigue about getting Graves is that, he's not necessarily super skilled with the puck, and I know a lot of people are like, oh, he has this great shot. I don't even think he has a great shot. But he has a decent offensive mind in the sense that he can push the puck up ice a little bit. Like he's not going to look extremely out of place in, like there would be points in time when the puck would end up on Dumoulin's stick, and you're just like, oh my God, last person you want the puck
how's he
to
gonna
be on his stick
how's he
right
gonna
now.
screw it up this time?
Yeah, and again, like I just said, Graves has his moments, but if you look at the degree to which the Penguins are generating offense when he's on the ice, it's a pretty strong rate.
I agree.
But then you can even look at like the isolated impacts of that. We're still early in the season and don't have a huge sample on that.
We keep saying that, but we're 21 games.
Well,
in?
specifically that, yes, we're 21 games here, but specifically in the sense of like the metrics that are isolating impacts, like the RAPM and that kind of stuff.
It's still a quarter of the season. I mean,
yes, but we do know for a fact that for those numbers to stabilize, you could really use like 3/4 to an entire season. Now, granted, I'm still paying attention to them, but I'm not tweeting out a 200-minute sample RAPM chart and being like, look, my offseason take was right, like so many people love to do. And honestly, I think we're just completely off the rails here at this point. But because somehow we ended up talking about Ryan Graves when we were talking about what needs to go right for this team. But
I think Ryan Graves is part of what needs to go right.
Yeah, but
if he continues
Graves not killing them, he'll be fine.
He's a $4.5 million player. $5 million player.
No, it's
4 and change.
4.1 or 4.
Okay, yeah. So
4.6, something like that.
But I mean, he's a second pairing guy. He's gonna sometimes find top pair minutes, and I think part of what has to go right is guys like him and Pettersson need to be the shutdown defenseman that they paid them to be.
Well, I don't think Graves is ever gonna be that shutdown guy. Like,
but
Pettersson's still far
close
away.
to it. He needs to be close to it.
I don't know that that's necessarily the case because of that offensive element.
And we're talking about goaltending. We talked about goaltending earlier. What better way to get better goaltending than see guys like Ryan Graves? Every time I say his name, I want to say Adam. I have to stop myself from saying Adam Graves every time I say his name. But the better he plays defensively, the better the goalies play.
I agree. I'm just saying I don't think that we're all of a sudden going to be talking about Ryan Graves being a 75th percentile defensive impact kind of guy. I don't think that's going to happen. He does make some really strong defensive plays, and he makes some really boneheaded defensive plays as well. That's just the nature of the kind of player he is. He's in his late 20s now. There's not really going to be a whole lot of development left with this kind of guy. But going back to what I was saying earlier, and early in the season, we were seeing him at points in time in the offensive zone where you're out on the ice with Crosby, Rust, Malkin, and Letang. You're the last guy that needs to be shooting, stop firing the puck into shin pads. But the first goal of the season, his first goal of the season was actually a really nice display of anticipation where it was against the Golden Knights. The Knights' defensive coverage was all out of whack and kind of jumbled. He noticed an opportunity to shrink the zone, came down to the tops of the circles or right below the tops of the circles, and a loose puck popped right to him, and he put it in the back of the net. So that element, like, I don't think that was necessarily the kind of goal we'd see Brian Dumoulin score. And
Yeah, I would agree.
he's certainly not having these massive, like, floundering moments behind his own net that we would see with Dumoulin last year. So that automatically is an upgrade in and of itself, and has a ripple effect across the board. I would agree.
With the last couple minutes that we have in this episode, gun to your head, power play not an option. What is the one thing that needs to improve for this team to be in the playoffs in April? Power play is not an option. Goaltending is not an option either because that's too easy of an answer. We just talked about it.
The easy answer is the bottom six.
Okay.
I still think they really need, and don't get me wrong, like the third line when it was intact with O'Connor, Eller, and Zohorna, and I know everything's kind of been jumbled with Raquel and Russ being out. That line was getting it done, not only just by they're XG gods, they're Corsi gods. No, they were scoring goals at a good.
They were contributing to the team.
They were contributing. I don't know if that will last whenever they are reunited. I don't know if that will last for the duration of the season. I still think that they need. I don't even care if it's a dude who is a drag on possession. They need like a bona fide finisher. Mm-hmm. Now, granted, I'm not talking about going out and getting a star player, but they need
like Phil Kessel.
Don't get me started. Don't get me started, man.
Can't take Patrick Kane anymore. He just signed with the Red Wings today.
Well, I'm not talking about him either. Can't do it. But yeah,
Corey Perry might went out of Chicago.
The Penguins need another scorer somewhere trickled throughout their lineup, and I think that's the easy answer.
What do you think the chances are Jeff Carter getting his scoring touchback? No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding this time.
We almost made it an episode without bringing him up.
Look, this is the 11th episode, the Darius Kasparaitis episode. I couldn't go the entire time without mentioning his name once.
Fair enough. But yeah, I would probably say improvement from the bottom six. And I know the fourth line has had some good games of late because Achari scored multiple goals, big time. But again, I don't think he's a long-term fit at center. Maybe they're just not concerned about that line at all. But if you're looking and talking about cup contending teams, they don't have to worry about, that's not a line that we want out there in any particular situation. Now, granted, you want to optimize deployment and all that, but you don't necessarily want to have to worry about having to over-optimize in-game management.
So, last thing, two-part question, quick answer. Rapid fire.
Yeah, I'm not good at these games. So
okay, let's rapid fire. So, where do they need to be at the deadline to be buyers?
Preferably in a playoff spot.
Do they get there?
Yes.
They're in a playoff spot by the deadline?
Yes.
What do they add? Because they don't have a ton of space.
As in who?
Well, no, because there's really no way to know.
What do they add? I don't know.
Do you think they add that finisher, or do you think they go a different route?
I think it's too early to tell because we don't know what's going on with Raquel yet. Is he going to be back? Because long term sometimes means 3 weeks, sometimes it means 2 months. Yeah. So is Raquel, and granted he's on long term injured reserve, so he's still within that window where he can't be activated. Now, but is he going to be out for another?
If he is out long term, and we're like long term, are we talking about? That's cap space that that they save as well. So that opens up a whole new ball game worth of players and options. But
right, but it won't be of significance to the point because unless you're banking on Raquel being out until the start of the playoffs, like his $5 million cap hit does
the old
matter.
lightning trick.
Yeah, the old Kucherov maneuver. So unless they're certain unless they're certain that he's going to be out until the playoff. Don't give me that look.
Listen, I'm
going to remind you of how you started this episode.
I've been just as bad. Listen, I heard one of our cameras ding, so
sounds like
I think we're wrapping this up. Yeah, I got nothing. You got anything else? We just lost another light.
We just lost another light. We're having a phenomenal return from break episode.
Listen,
the sculpture, for those of you that are not watching, the sculpture is still up. It does look a little sweaty.
I've been recording video since 9 a.m. today. That's why the lights are dying. That's why the cameras are dying. That's why I'm dying as I knock over my microphone. For Danny Shirey, I'm Eddie Provident. This has been one of the most different episodes of the Breakdowns and Breakaways podcast. We'll see you next week.